How's it, everybody? Welcome to Exponential Africa Live, a weekly live show that focuses on bringing the best thought leadership, technology, and innovation to the African continent and the world. I want to introduce you to a special friend of mine, Jibo. Say hi, Jibo.
Hello.
So this awesome little robot is a good little friend of mine, and I followed him for a few years and finally got to purchase Jibo in San Francisco in 2018. He can do all different types of things. Jibo, can you tell me a joke? Tell them a joke.
Why can't a bicycle stand on its own? Because it's too tired.
He can also take photos, and let's take a photo of the crew. Jibo, can you take a photo, please, of the crew over there?
A photo. Let's do it. Just trying to find your face here. I see you. Stay right there. Here we go. 3, 2, 1.
And there you go. Just like that. Okay then, Jibo, thanks for that. Jibo was a little ahead of its time, and the company actually isn't around anymore. However, they have pushed robotics to a new frontier, and he's still a great little companion. We are really loving all the incredible feedback we've been getting. Please keep calling, emailing, commenting, and engaging with us. It really helps us improve and get better. You know the saying, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it, by Peter Drucker? Well, your feedback helps us measure each show, and based on that feedback, I'm excited to say that we'll be shifting the show to a Thursday every week instead of a Monday. Just to confirm, the 3D printing revolution will take place on Thursday, the 18th of June. We will notify you guys by email, but just to repeat, the next week's show is moving to Thursday, the 18th at 5 p.m. Another exciting bit of news for us is that we've launched the Exponential Africa live stream on the Singularity South Africa app. Once you've registered for any of these shows, you can immediately gain access to the app and watch the live show, chat to other delegates, and network. Download the app on the Android or Apple stores today. The app is called Singularity U South Africa. So far, we've raised over 6,500 Rand for students at Maharishi to supply them with data for remote learning, so thank you. Please continue to donate by scanning the QR code on your screen and keep supporting all these students. The robots aren't coming, they are here. Sarah Bergbreiter commented at our Singularity South Africa Summit in 2018. And our mission as Singularity South Africa and ManMade is to help #futureproof Africa by building a global community of change makers who can help solve some of Africa's and the world's greatest challenges to lead the way into this future. Robots are a huge part of all of our futures, and we need to embrace robotics and automation to get ahead in this industry. Our goal is to educate, empower, and inspire you to take action and use this exponential technology to improve Africa and the world. Use your networks, this amazing community, to help you get you there faster. Tonight we'll be covering robots to the rescue in two main areas. One, how robots have played an important role to help assist humans during the COVID-19 pandemic. And two, how robots will transform our lives from the way we work, are entertained, educated, and travel. We'll be covering some of the latest tech stories around robotics. Then we'll have a discussion with our super smart panel. We have Silas Adekunle, a robotics entrepreneur, Benji Rosman, an associate professor of robotics at the University of Witwatersrand, and Peter Zing, a faculty member of Singularity U Australia. A special mention goes out to our partners, who this would not be possible without: our collaboration partner, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our global partner, Deloitte, and our strategic partner, MTN. Thank you for your commitment and dedication to making a positive impact in South Africa and Africa. Lastly, if you want to see more of these weekly episodes, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, that red button, subscribe, and you can register on the website to get more info and be eligible for the giveaways. Amazing that we've already received over 5,000 views already from the last 3 shows. Thank you to all who are watching, subscribing, and engaging with us. Super, let's jump right into it. ReportLinker.com forecasts that the global medical robotics market is expected to surpass $16 billion by 2025. So we thought it was fitting to start with a roundup of how robots have risen to the occasion during COVID-19. With the world experiencing a shortage in PPE, robots are being utilized on the front line to ensure that healthcare practitioners are kept out of harm's way. From scrubbing floors to taking temperatures, robots are on the rise. Italy is using robots like Tommy to work in hospital wards that are the most contagious, and Tommy relays information between patients and doctors. India's state of Tamil Nadu has robots delivering medicine. Tunisia has a P-Guard patrolling public spaces to ensure that their lockdown laws are adhered to. And Shanghai's robots deliver food to patients, just like Starship Robotics in San Fran. Numerous hospitals are utilizing UVD robots that enter rooms autonomously and destroy the virus on surfaces and in the air. So what can we look forward to? South African-based NextMed is currently developing a biosensor capable of monitoring multiple vital signs via a single patch. They claim AI will offer early detection and diagnosis, as well as predict outcomes. Robotic experts in the UK are working on what they claim would be the first healthcare robot that will hold conversation with more than one individual at the same time. In 5 years, we'll see exponential growth in this industry. And if another existential threat comes at us, we can be sure that robots will be there to the rescue. Now it's time for our tech news. Optimus Prime, R2-D2, Wall-E, and the Mars rover are just a few of the most loved robots from popular culture. With the most intriguing minds inventing some pretty cool robots, it's no wonder we're seeing such awesome developments in this space. Robots whip up the perfect breakfast. An omelette is pretty easy to mess up, even with eggs that don't come from chickens, like we heard from Oturo last week. But through machine learning and not too much egg eating, engineers from the University of Cambridge have cracked it. In collaboration with a domestic appliance company, Beko, the team trained a robot to prepare an omelette, from cracking the eggs to plating the dish, and refined culinary skills to produce something delicious. So how does the culinary industry take this news? Quite well, actually, says Barney Ragg, CEO and co-founder of Karakuri, the world's first customizable food preparation system that combines robotics, automation, and machine learning. One of the company's advisors is top chef Heston Blumenthal, and he suggests that automating the mundane tasks allows kitchen staff to focus on their creativity in the kitchen. Spot the robot dog lands a couple of jobs. Popular Mechanics suggests you congratulate Spot on LinkedIn for his position. But those congrats would start racking up, because not only has Spot secured a role as an inspector at a Norwegian oil and gas company, he's roaming the plains of New Zealand, herding sheep, and also employed by the Massachusetts Bomb Squad, as well as the government in Singapore, to assist with social distancing enforcement. Spot has also been called into hospitals to carry a device and a two-way radio to assist with patient and healthcare practitioner consultations. Spot's CV looks good because he never tires, is highly adaptable, and gathers huge amounts of data. It's no wonder that more and more companies are looking to invest in a Spot of their own. Talk about a multi-skilled employee. Fantasy or fact? Protective shields and helmets are being printed even as far afield as Wroclaw. Amazing how the whole world has gotten involved to help solve this problem. 3D printers are producing protective gear to meet the current demand, and Wroclaw, Poland, is upping their 3D printing game, so to speak. What's phenomenal about these printers is that they'll offer full color printing using multiple materials. It's amazing. Dungeon and Dragon players will also be happy to know that styrofoam sculpting using hot wire is now a real thing. ETH Zurich's Department of Computer Science is 3D printing 2 armed robots that carve elaborate models from polystyrene foam using heated metal wire. This is just extraordinary. Robot masters pinpoint landing. The perfect landing is not an easy feat. Simone Biles made jumping and landing look easy, and yet we know that this is definitely not the case. Getting robots to jump has had all fundies around the world scrambling, and once they got the jump right, getting a robot to stop jumping is even harder. UC Berkeley's Salto jumping robot has mastered landing so that researchers no longer have to snatch it out of the air mid-jump. And as if this breakthrough is not enough, researchers affiliated with Google Robotics have successfully created a robot that taught itself to walk. They were using deep reinforcement learning, a type of reinforcement learning that draws on principles from psychology, to achieve this just within a couple of hours. How crazy is that? Benji, who's on the show later, is an expert in reinforcement learning. And we need to get you some legs, hey guy? Time for our African Innovation Spotlight. It's really exciting to be showcasing this Robotics Learning Academy from our very own African neighbor in Ghana, because somebody in South Africa should do the same. The Ghana Robotics Academy Foundation has a mission to ensure that young people are invigorated by STEM subjects. The Academy is a not-for-profit organization behind RoboFest, a festival that encourages students to master computer science, communication, critical thinking, teamwork, and problem-solving skills. And they do this while they're designing and building cool robots. The Ghana Robotics Academy Foundation also organized a national championship called the Robotics Inspired Science Education, or RISE, competition, with robotics coding and 3D printing workshops offered to children as young as 7 years old, and international partnerships through the World Robotic Olympiad, with the likes of Illinois Tech as their latest partner. It's no wonder that this institution is such an inspiration for our continent. And we need to be thinking, how do we do this in South Africa more and more and more? And we want to showcase a South African company in the next couple of months. The foundation's founder, Dr. Ashite Tribi Olenu, is chief engineer and group supervisor at NASA and has received numerous awards and recognition for his contribution to missions. With lots of hard work from students and dedication from teachers, many students have been accepted into universities and had access to participate in international comps like RoboCup and First Lego League. So it's gold for Ghana. Come on, South Africa, where's our robotics school? Thanks to the ones who've helped fund almost 1,000 Maharishi students with some data. Over the last 3 shows, we've raised over 6,500 Rand, and we're hoping to raise this number to 20,000 Rand soon. You can scan the QR code on your screen and make a donation. All the proceeds from tonight's show will go towards helping educate students in South Africa. Maharishi Institute is doing its best to help students keep learning, and they need data for students who are working remotely and can't afford their own data. All these students are from really tough financial backgrounds, and any help would be hugely appreciated. A small donation that keeps kids learning. Scan the QR code above me or on the screen, and all the proceeds go to Maharishi Institute and help these South Africans with data as well as devices. We'll leave the QR code up on the screen as much as possible, allowing you the opportunity to donate, and you can also find the QR code on our website. Our big giveaway from Maharishi Institute will allow one learner a chance to win a USA business degree here in South Africa. The student who wins this opportunity will get all the South African qualifications, daily lunch, and all learning materials. The value of this opportunity is a whopping $125,000 or 2.2 million Rand. Make sure to register on the website to be eligible for the prize. We'll be randomly selecting the winner from the registrations and allowing the person who wins to nominate one lucky student. The winner will be announced during the Workforce of the Future show happening on the 2nd of July. It's time to move on to the main segment of tonight's show, Robots to the Rescue panel. In a time where touch is still essential, robots have come to the rescue, from early detection to scanning for fevers or delivery or protection. Robots have stepped up and shown us how the future could look like, with greater assistance from them. Robots have played this incredibly important role to help fight and assist during the COVID-19 pandemic, and we're going to be discussing that with the panel, as well as we're going to be looking at some of the latest developments in robotics and why now is the time to exponentially expand in the world with robotics and in our global markets. Robots extend and augment our abilities as humans, and how will this help us, and as well as help the disadvantaged? And we're going to discuss with the panel how robots will transform our lives from the way we work, are entertained, educated, and travel. We have an amazing panel for tonight, and I'm really excited to get going. We have Silas Adekunle, Benji Rosman, and Peter Zing. Silas Adekunle is a Nigerian-British robotics technology entrepreneur, engineer, and inventor. He was previously the CEO of Reach Robotics, a company he founded during his undergraduate studies, and which created Mechamon, an entertainment and education platform that combined robotics, AR, and gaming. Mechamon was launched globally with distributors such as Apple, and the company generated millions in revenue and raised millions in venture capital. Silas is now focused on cloud infrastructure for robotics and automation in Europe and enabling robotics on the African continent, starting with education and research labs. Silas, great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I am well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us from all the way from the UK.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Silas, do you want to tell us a bit about your amazing journey? I mean, you're still quite young in terms of what you've achieved. How did your journey start, and how's it been?
Thanks for calling me young, although I don't. It doesn't feel like that anymore. I'm going to be 29 this year, but still relatively young. So in terms of my journey itself, started in Nigeria. So moved to the UK when I was about 12 years old with my parents, and but my interest in robotics and engineering had started, back in Nigeria. I loved everything biology, everything zoology. In fact, I try and travel a lot to get exposure to wildlife and continue that into my adult life. So I've spent quite a bit of time in South Africa around that as well. When I moved to the UK, to cut the long story short, went to after school clubs, learnt robotics in the same way that some of the kids in Ghana are now having a chance to. And I went to university, studied robotics. I'd always known that I wanted to make a living through robotics. And in my final year, or penultimate year actually, started a company called Reach Robotics. And what we set out to do was to be the first to combine robotics, gaming, and augmented reality. And that was really to bring a platform out that I thought the consumer robotics industry didn't have at the time. The technology was there to create something that looked like it was from science fiction, but where was it in real life? And we brought that product to life over 6 tough years. Took the company from just myself and my co-founders to 65 plus staff. We raised a few million in revenue. We generated a few million in revenue, and also raised venture capital as well. And then late last year, closed the business down, and I acquired some of the assets out of the business. And that was mainly because of the tough climate of the consumer robotics industry. And what I am now focused on is, first of all, as mentioned, cloud infrastructure for robotics and automation. And we can dig into that a bit more later. And then second, more importantly, is robotics on the African continent. And the reason for that is obviously it's a passion for myself, given where I come from. But there are two challenges that you're looking at there. You have to look at the education infrastructure, and you also have to look at the labor market itself as well. And if Africa doesn't want to be left behind, and also the fact that there are so many young people and so much talent that's being untapped into, it's a no-brainer in terms of a continent that needs support in developing that ecosystem, but that's also going to be a great challenger in the long term as well. So that's a little bit of background on myself.
No, brilliant. Thanks so much for that. And we definitely want to touch on a bit later what you mean by cloud infrastructure and automation in robotics. That sounds really exciting. And I think that Africa needs help from people like you and some of our other panels. So thanks so much. We're going to move on to our next panelist, who is Benji Rosman. Benji Rosman is an associate professor at the University of Wits. I'm going to say this time, not Witswatersrand, and sound non-South African, where he runs a robotics, autonomous, intelligence and learning laboratory. He is also a Singularity University faculty member, specializing in machine learning and robotics. Benji, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mick. It's great to be here.
So Benj, you really are trying to change the game in South Africa, and you've some of the smartest minds have come from the courses that you've taught that I know. What are some of the things you're doing now at Wits to really push robotics further in South Africa?
Thanks. So when I finished my undergraduate and I wanted to carry on studying, I was always excited by technology and all the cool new advances, but to carry on, I had to go abroad and study in the UK. And I vowed that that should never be the case again. No one should ever have to leave the country or the continent to study state-of-the-art ideas in technology such as robotics and machine learning. And so in my time since coming back to South Africa, I've been trying to push, along with a number of other amazing colleagues that I work with, to build the kinds of environment you would see at any of the top universities anywhere. So we've been trying to get our students to be an active part of the international community. We've been investing in technology and actual robots in our labs. And then in a kind of broader sense, we've been involved in a number of initiatives to grow machine learning and robotics on the African continent, and to try and help other labs start up and foster collaboration with other people and get students from across the board into the field that I'm really passionate about. And just one of those projects was the Deep Learning Indaba, which has now become the largest machine learning summer school in the world. And together with a number of colleagues that are all either based in Africa or from Africa, we've been growing these kinds of platforms to allow thousands of university-level students and people in industry and startups and so on to get more exposure and experience and connections in this world of amazing technology.
I think it's so exciting and it's so reassuring that what you're doing. It sounds like this is exactly what we need. We spoke, I don't know if you saw a bit earlier, but we spoke a bit about reinforcement learning and how they are training the robots using reinforcement learning. Do you want to just touch on that very briefly, that concept?
Sure. So that's actually the area of, well, my particular focus in research, and that's the kind of intersection of machine learning and decision making. So that's really, how do you learn to make decisions? And this is a field I find fascinating. It's got roots that tie to biology and psychology and all sorts of things. And it's this idea that unlike many simple problems, maybe not simple problems in machine learning, many of the common problems in machine learning involve, given an image, is this a cat or a dog? And that's what we call supervised learning. But the kinds of problems we work on here is about behaviors. So can I make good decisions now to put myself in a good position to make better decisions later, and over time achieve some sort of behavior that's really what we had in mind building these systems. So those are the kinds of ideas that you see with a challenge like learning to walk. You need to make a number of small decisions to achieve some grand behavior at the end of the day. Thanks
so much for that, and we'll definitely dive into a bit more of that with some questions later. Our next panelist we have for this evening is Peter Zing. Peter is the co-founder of Transhumanism Australia and an associate director at KPMG, working on technology and growth initiatives. Peter is also part of the Singularity University faculty and is an advisory board member for the Singularity U Australia team. He is also an executive member of Science Party Australia. Peter, thanks for being on the show and joining us all the way from Australia.
Hey, Mick. How you going? Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We really appreciate that you have taken the time. What's the time there now?
It's 1:30, but it's only about an hour after I usually sleep. So it's great and to be privileged to be part of this awesome panel.
No, so thank you so much for doing this at this late hour. I really must say, I really enjoy a lot of your posts and your brain, and you've really stretched my thinking over the last couple of months of knowing each other. We met at the Singularity U Australia Summit last year.
Yeah, that was awesome. And it was great to see you in person and see the world come together in such a remote place such as Down Under. So it was really awesome to meeting you. Yeah, there's just so much news happening. It's so hard to keep up. You know, a single person wouldn't be able to do it. So I think collectively we'll have a go at it and try to do a good job as well.
And do you want to just explain to us, what is transhumanism? Like, are we going to connect with the machines? What is it that you focus on?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very cyborg, right? It sounds like superheroes, but essentially it's about how do you transcend the limitations of our human biology through science and technology. So it could be everything from using smartphones to then slowly integrating more and more technology into your body. We've seen some biohackers here in Australia. They've got chip implants to help them use as payment passes. And then you got more far-fetched things like brain-computer interfaces, which are being used by people with disabilities. But in the future, it might help us enhance ourselves in essentially upgrading our brains, connected to the cloud and leveraging the AI so that we don't get left behind.
Wow, it's super exciting. And that leads, I think, thank you for that. It definitely leads us into our first round of questions with the panel. You know, Benji, what do you think are some of the ethical practices we need to put in place to make sure that we build friendly robots, and when we connect them to ourselves, that we connect them in the right way? You know, how do we do this ethically?
I mean, that's a huge question, and a question that's applicable to any of these new technologies. I mean, we've all seen the terrifying movies and of robot uprisings, and while I don't think that's the real thing we need to worry about, there's a number of challenges that range from machines being able to make decisions that are ethical with what we agree in society are ethical principles, down to things like making sure we don't have, say, racial biases built into our systems. And I think these come up in all sorts of interesting ways. So there've been studies to try and elicit what the ethics and principles are in different societies. And turns out in different countries, there's different values. And I think this in itself presents a great challenge, because we're not even clear what all of our ethical principles are that we should be trying to emulate in our machines. And firstly, what I'm very excited about is this gives us the opportunity to actually ask these difficult questions, which maybe was just in the realm of philosophy before. But for now, we really have to get society to come together and agree what are the set of norms and ethics that we do want to be emulating.
I mean, Silas, when you made the Mechamon robot, what ethics did you put into that robot? Was there any ethics, or was it at a level before that?
I mean, it's a great point that Benji made in terms of kind of where humanity is right now. Even we aren't fully clear yet on all of there's no sense of a collective value, because humans are so different. And so when you're creating robots, you know, on the first hand, you have to, you know, make sure that they are legal. You know, the laws are generally, in most cases, designed to protect us and protect human lives. And so, you know, when it comes to designing robots and building robots, ultimately, as it stands right now, they are a product. So when it comes to something like Mechamon, which is designed for entertainment and education, you know, some of the things we had to be careful about were, you know, data, confidentiality, all of those things. Now, as you start to build more advanced robots, though, and you put more decision-making power into those robots, And especially if those robots start to embody forms that humans are familiar with, and robots that kind of look like us, then there's a lot more consideration and a lot more responsibility on our shoulders, and particularly around points in terms of everyone's familiar with the concept of training data now, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't train robots properly or provide them with a diversified data set as a starting point, then you can end up having robots that only think a certain way, if we can use the word think like that. So those are some of the topics around it, but it's a very broad, complex, deep topic.
Peter, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I really agree with Ben and Silas on, it should reflect society's values, but those values are constantly changing, even throughout time. So if we look back, centuries past or in decades past, our societal values reflect very differently to what it is today, and it'll be the same going forward in the future. What I'm really concerned about is that the data right now is sort of very centralized in the major tech companies, and in China as well, it's sort of centralized across those major tech companies as well, with access by the government. So when we look at it from a centralization perspective, in the future, it's sort of going to increase more and more. And the values will be reflected by those, what the tech companies can determine, inheriting any biases, any things that should be made transparent, and all the AI ethics that we're currently challenging at KPMG as well. So, alternatives to what this might look like in the future where it's more decentralized, there are some proposed initiatives using, distributed ledger technology. Singularity Net rings a bell. Basically, it's an AI marketplace where anyone can contribute their AI, and if it's used by others, there's a reward system on how that's monetized for each of the individual AI publishers. But so that way, it sort of allows more people to participate in these AI and robotic initiatives, whereas right now it just feels like the tech companies are having essentially eating up all the smaller companies, especially in the current climate.
So Peter, thanks. I think that was going to be my follow-on question, was that who's actually deciding? Is it the tech companies? Is it governments? Is it the IEEE? Who's actually deciding what these ethical practices and standards should be?
Yeah, there's a lot of thought leadership papers and the standardizations of it. The IEEE you mentioned. In Australia, there is the Data 61. They actually released a thought leadership paper on what are the AI and ethics standards. That's the starting page. But Australia essentially is a net importer of these AI technologies. We're not the large tech companies like in the US or in China. And so I think that sort of roadmap is also being pursued, but I'm keen to hear from Benji and Silas around what's happening in South Africa and the UK.
I can chime in my voice on that. I mean, you've got a few different angles to it. You've got regulations, you've got standards. Usually, I'd say industry usually takes a lead, and then until something happens that drives kind of, that becomes a big news, is when government tends to step in, at least from experience anyway. So if you look at what's happening with the driverless car industry, it was hype for a long time, and then suddenly you had some kind of high profile incidents that happened, and then there was a huge kind of amount of regulatory lockdown, mostly around the I guess in the US market. In the UK, some of the things I've seen and been involved in are kind of the government has showed a lot of curiosity and interest. So there's a project called the AI Black Box to look into the decision-making processes of robots and to plan in the future, so that every robot that does something that impacts human life can explain and justify why that decision was made. So ultimately, I feel like it's led by industry. You have standards when industries realize that they have to work, or different parties realize they have to work together to be able to then achieve scale. If you don't have standards, you can't then start to scale that technology. But ultimately, if it has the potential to affect human lives on a large scale, that is when government seems to step in.
I think Silas raises an interesting question with the self-driving cars there. There's always been this question of, given different scenarios, what should a self-driving car do? And this talks to things like the trolley problem in philosophy. And I think where this is very interesting is that, again, firstly, there's the values that you have to sort out and what actual choices should the system make. Also bearing in mind, relating that to how a human would have reacted in the same situation. But over and above that, there's questions around, again, as Sada said, with kind of treating it as a black box, and you don't want to do that. You want to have some transparency in how decisions are made. So for example, if there is an accident, who is held accountable? Why did that accident happen? And I think this just gets progressively more difficult to solve. If you look these days at some of these technologies have, say, machine learning components to them, it's possible that a car could have gotten into an accident because of some of the training data that was fed to it and the way its systems were configured because of that. And now you might say that actually, in some sense, an accident occurred because data came in from a set of drivers driving under different conditions to what you had in mind. And so now there's this big distribution in how you attribute the choices and the consequences for what happened. And that makes everything even more difficult.
I think it's so interesting because you have technology solves a problem on the one hand, but on the other hand, we're creating new problems for ourselves to solve, to make our lives better ultimately. And that leads into this new infrastructure that we're going to have to develop. And Silas, what your focus on is on this cloud infrastructure. What do we need to put in place so that we can have this big data that can be transparent and shared, and that we can automate and scale robotics faster?
I mean, some of the challenges you have, is the huge volume of data. I think the world has realized over the last kind of decade that data is very valuable. Data is gold. When it comes to enterprise, the more you know, the more you can see patterns, the more you can predict. And so data provides an opportunity to make processes a lot more efficient, to not have to wait for something to put this into context for everyone that's listening, to not have to wait for a piece of machine in a factory to break down, but you know that, okay, this has been running for this long, and it helps you to be able to have, deal with warranty and all of those. It's called predictive analysis. And, some of the infrastructure that's needed in the near term for the world to really start being able to take advantage of robotics and automation technology is to do around data. How do you move that volume of data, and how do you have better data, right? If you're looking at video versus just raw files, video is much bigger, much longer, as opposed to just raw text files or just raw positional files, if you're just looking at what direction robots are moving in and things like that. So, we're picking a slice of that challenge, which is, rather than focusing on the automation technology itself, how do you allow businesses that are creating automation technology or using this automation technology to be more efficient with their time and the limited resources that they have? That is quickly connecting their devices to the cloud, being able to share that data easily over a dashboard, and so that then grows with them as they scale as well. And that's just one angle of the challenge. You could look at, say 5G technology that's coming around the corner, for example. That's being touted as this thing that's going to make everything infinitely faster, but that takes time to build as well, and that costs money. So there are different aspects of the ecosystem that leverage each other to be better. There's also the part of it that's down to do with education. If you don't have a sufficiently trained workforce that can actually use the robots and the automation technology, efficiently, you can't tap into that the benefits of that technology as well. So there are quite a few different aspects of it. But what we are starting to focus on now is, how do you make those people that are trying to use automation technology much more efficient?
Thanks so much for that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Yeah. If you think about all the basic needs you will need to get, food, water, shelter, and then the access to the internet through electricity as well. The 5G, towers essentially will take time to come up and essentially connect those dots. But something like a Starlink, that these satellites being shipped, at 60 satellites every week that's going up through SpaceX and Elon Musk's company. will hopefully blanket the world in terms of access. Doesn't matter if you're in rural Australia or in a developing nation or in third world countries, but basically, as long as you can access to the sky, you have a line of sight, you'll be able to access the internet. And, you know, combined with solar panels and battery technology, we'll be able to supply that sort of level of energy access. There was an X Prize learning X Prize from the X Prize Foundation, but basically it had 3 winners, basically creating an open source technology, and Google funded the deployment of 100,000 smart devices, essentially being able to take any child through K-12 education and learning English along the way. So that sort of open source technology that's spread out through the smart devices connected to the cloud will enable that sort of revolution in understanding and using AI and robotics. And to your point around, you know, that need to connect all the nodes, you need that connected learning. Companies like Comma AI is probably like more under the radar. They're essentially a direct competitor to Tesla's autopilot. Comma AI's background essentially from George Hotz, the guy that's jailbroken the iPhone, and he essentially is trying to jailbreak cars, modern cars, with a dash cam. You know, kind of like they repurposed a smart device, a smartphone, and turn it into a dash cam that you can turn your modern car into a driverless vehicle. So this is level 2 autonomy. So it's none of the sort of hype around level 4 or 5. They just want to make driving chill. But they're essentially crowdsourcing the collective learning of any driver that's installed this Comma AI device. They have the Comma 2 now using open source software called the Open Pilot, and they've actually accumulated over 50 million miles to date. You know, they have thousands of monthly active users, and they're generating revenue straight away. So that's one to look out for. And that's where you can sort of see the infrastructure being the connected nodes, along with your cloud-based servers, Starlink connected internet, more sensors, and one more thing probably is the edge compute, like the chips that require the AI to be computed at the very edge instead of pinging back to the servers, because that delay will cause many accidents if you don't make that happen really closely.
Wow, it's so interesting to see that there are so many different areas of robotics. I mean, there's been a huge amount of predictions that robotics is going to be $1 trillion industry, and it will because of all these different verticals within robotics, that only once you get into the industry can you start finding your way in this incredible field. So we've got a whole bunch of questions. I'm going to move to some of the questions from the audience. Benj, let's start with you. We've got a question from Tyron Janse van Vieren. People are usually freaked out by the Boston Dynamics type robots. How important is it to consider how people feel about robot design?
So that's an interesting question, and this is a problem that's existed in robotics for a long time. There's this notion of the uncanny valley, which is that the more human-like something gets, the more comfortable people are with it, until you get to almost but not quite human-like, and then people tend to have this feeling of revulsion and are really put off by things like robots that are almost human-like. So that's why you see a lot of designs of robots have historically tended to be more like cute anime figures or like animals or something like that, to not put people off in that way. But there's also a lot of good reasons to try and make robots that are humanoid or human-like in their form. And that's, you know, typically having legs and arms and a human kind of size. And that's because the world is designed for humans. And so if you want a robot to be able to operate in your natural environment, you want it to open doors and climb up stairs and so on, it has to have human-like proportions. So there's a tough balance to walk here. And I think a lot of it's actually come in with, the challenges have come in with getting things like facial expressions right. And you'll see a lot of what Boston Dynamics do is they shy away from that in general. And they're focused more on things like the walking and the arm movements, which I think are getting quite natural at this point. And I think that's really the answer, is to try to get that balance right. So it depends on your application. You could also find, so there's a lot of work that's been done with robots to interact with autistic children. And in that case, you can get away with using more cartoon-like characters because you don't need to be opening doors and interacting with environments.
Awesome. Silas, I mean, when you made the Mechamon, I'm sure you had a lot of these considerations.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Mechamon's case was interesting or different because that was a robot that was designed to get a reaction. So, we wanted something that people couldn't ignore. I've had all sorts of comments. So Mechamon, if anyone hasn't seen it, Google it later. It's a four-legged robot. Some people say it looks like a spider. Some people say it looks cute. But the thing is, like, people couldn't ignore it. And some of the decisions that was made around designing that robot was we wanted something that was stable when it was walking around, when it was moving. It needed to have a minimum of 4 legs. We even considered a 6-leg version, but that was too creepy for people. So 4 was the balance of cost efficient, because the more legs you have as well, the more motors, the more joints, the more expensive the product is as well. And so to echo Benji's point, you've always got this balance between functionality and design, right? You need to have functional design. And I think the more robots start to come into, our world, into the human world, and the more we see them, in the same way, product design is a big part of, mobile phone, tablets, cars. You're also going to have, product design being a big part of robots that are coming out to market. If people are repulsed by them, they're not going to do a good job. They're not going to be able to serve us. So it's going to really be a case of that balance and listening to what people want.
Thanks, Silas. I think we've lost you there.
I had PowerPoint, yeah.
I've lost the sound
but
of you
yeah,
guys.
in a
I'm just going
similar
to move on to the
vein.
next question, if you can still hear.
Yeah,
So we've got quite a few people asking the same question, and I'm just going to sum it up with Lauren's question. How do you make a robot care about the future of humanity? Peter, if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about the values of society and how you can embed that into a robot in the first place to then make it empathize with our cause. So that is sort of a lot of the issues that are being tackled with the development, the researchers in artificial general intelligence. So I mentioned SingularityNet. Their ultimate quest is to try to create artificial general intelligence. Same with OpenAI. Same with Google's DeepMind. So they are all part of the sort of the Future of Life Institute. Essentially an institute that's looking at existential risk and what AI might have on humanity if essentially decides to turn on us, right? And, there are all those sort of that Benji mentioned, the movies that depict it wrongly, but you don't really need a super intelligent, like ultra conscious AI to actually cause havoc, like as dictated by something like Nick Bostrom's super intelligence book, where it just keeps on creating paperclips. But how would you get AI to actually empathize with us? Yeah, well, so you start with embedding our values. One of the reasons why Sophia the robot was designed to have limbs was that it could empathize with humans to have a physical presence, the arms and legs, and eventually powered by SingularityNet was the vision that Ben Goertzel had. So if it could actually interact with people more and more and understand us as humans and how we actually care for each other and society, and reflect the current state of social values and continue to feed that in as society evolves, that's sort of how we could hopefully make the robots care about humans in the future. But ultimately, I think from a transhumanist perspective, the best way would be to merge with AI so that we're not actually left behind, because once an AI becomes, artificial general intelligence, it'll probably immediately become super intelligent at the trajectory it's going. So it'd be like human level and then a super intelligent almost immediately. So that's why I think merging with AI will give us that sort of plan B insurance policy that we're not just being discarded like we would treat, like, say, pets. This is the best case scenario. We would be essentially along for the journey because merging with AI allows us to consciously connect with that as a tertiary layer with these brain-computer interfaces, such as ones proposed by Neuralink.
Thanks so much. Benj, I can see you.
Maybe
you want to jump in there?
That as well. Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about specifically one kind of approach someone could take. So this is something that I work on with some of my students in my lab. You can take the idea that you want to build a robot that helps humans specifically. So we could say the objective of this robot is to help some human or whichever humans in its environment achieve whatever tasks it's trying to achieve. And so the work we're doing there is about, can you try and identify what the human is trying to do, and then predict what would be the most useful thing you could do to help them with that goal. So while it doesn't have, some sort of soft, fuzzy notion of empathy, it's designed in such a way to identify the human's goals and help them with it. So if you can estimate what this human's trying to achieve, what's maybe the hardest point along there, or where could it benefit? So for example, if you were trying to help a human in a workshop, maybe based on, you see the human working on a car, and then based on what they're doing at the moment, maybe you can predict, they're likely to need this screwdriver next. Let me go across the workshop to fetch that for them, and hopefully bring it back by the time the human needs it. And so a lot of that is just by watching behaviors and learning from enough data of interacting with humans, what humans do when they're looking for certain goals, and then trying to build a system that aligns with those goals specifically.
Super interesting. I think we need a lot more time to get deeper into this debate. I want to ask you another question from Arne Barman. What kind of economic model fits with robot-driven society? We've got quite a few questions around when the robots are starting to earn their own income and they start creating a new economy in the market. How are we going to deal with this in terms of our society? Silas, do you want to kick it off?
Hopefully you guys can hear me okay now, and there's no latency. All right, cool. I think so. I mean, that's also a very complex question to answer, with many people taking different sides of the fence on it. You have people, looking at a universal kind of robot tax, where there's a certain value placed on how much improvement or how much additional revenue a robot changes, and that is then contributed to a type of a pot that is going back to support humans. In the short term, some of the changes that you're seeing in how robotics technology is deployed is to move from a model of manufacturing one robot and selling that to somebody else to robots as a service, where someone owns the capital investment cost for the robot, and then you essentially get paid a monthly fee for having that robot. And that helps you de-risk the investment in a robot initially, which then helps to kind of drive adoption of the robotics technology. So that's what I can tell you in terms of short-term changes. But in terms of long-term changes, that's more of a societal challenge that will vary depending on the environment you're in.
I mean, I'm quite excited to think that my car in the future might be actually earning me extra money, as long as I own that car or I have some sort of
Would it be your car at that point?
Sorry?
Would it be your car at that point? Would you buy a car?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
so
earning the means production, essentially. Yeah, it's
I get free rides
as we see more automation happen, more means of production is sort of focused on the hands of the few. And if you think about the shareholders of these tech companies, they're essentially receiving dividends or retaining the profits as more of the automation and the GDP is captured by these tech companies. So the essentially the value of human labor essentially is the market share of that is diminishing as these robots are able to take more and more of that market share. And I think, economically, we might look at something like, a robot tax that Silas mentioned, or a universal basic income, essentially a dividend to be a citizen in a jurisdiction. We've seen the impact that COVID has had on, a lot of the sort of middle class and lower class around many countries. And it just goes to show how unstable that would be if more automation comes online to take away that sort of repetitive labor and the low skilled work. There's a lot of impact that's probably unaccounted for, because if we look at historically at the Industrial Revolution, there was always new jobs created as a result of the automation. But this time it just feels like the speed, the pace of change might be too fast for people to retrain. By the time they retrain into those new skill sets, the automation might actually overlap that sort of new roles that they're training for. So that is the risk this time around in this fourth industrial revolution, and how we prepare, governments around the world of the impact of the social unrest, of the inequalities that might derive from these sort of use cases. So universal basic income is becoming more and more topical, as you can see in the US right now.
I completely agree with Peter as well. I think this is going to be one of the big questions of our time, not just with robots, but with automation in general. And as we see a larger and larger percentage of jobs and work in general being automated, I think we've got to reflect on this and see if it gives us the opportunity to redesign society in some way or another. And I think the big question is really that you're going to see this, all of the wealth accruing by the people that own these small numbers of or small numbers of companies. And I think things like UBI are definitely the way to go forward. I like to flip this on its head and say that work is something immoral that robotics should be the solution to, and we've just got to figure out exactly how to implement this from an economical point of view, to stop a lot of people doing work that actually is harmful to them and rather antithetical to a good quality life.
That's why I think it's so important that we are focusing on this, because especially during this COVID-19 time, it's given us this opportunity, like you say, to reimagine and redesign the way we do things. And hopefully we can embrace these robots, like we saw in the news section earlier, to really help us with some of these immoral type of jobs, or putting ourselves in danger when a robot could complete the task for us. We're going to keep moving on to questions.
Robotic automation can create for people is pretty amazing. Just so that way, it sort of allows us to free up that capacity to work on things that we're actually passionate about. We do things that we're currently being unpaid for, like volunteering or essentially home caretaking. The stay-at-home mums and dads. There's a lot of roles out there that are essentially not being paid and accounted for in the GDP figures, but bring a lot of sort of meaning and purpose for people that they do it, right? So that's sort of being accounted for. That's where automation can lift up the means of production, and then humans can live out to be humans and actually enjoy what they actually do.
Thanks so much. We're going to take two more questions. We're running out of time. We're going to go to Amin Boda. Amin Boda just asked, in your opinion, what is it that truly makes us human? I think that many people often forget the importance of human philosophical change that cannot be mutually exclusive to the technological changes that will be coming in the future. Silas, do you want to kick us off on that one? Quite a tough one.
These are very deep. These are the questions in line with the what is the meaning of life, right? So, my answer isn't gospel, and everyone has an opinion on this. I guess it's easier to answer a question of what isn't human, right? Humans are ultimately complex. We're only just starting to unpack what intelligence is. As we build robots and we try to make them intelligent, you realize, an IQ score isn't enough to judge the value of one person. You've got emotional intelligence, you've got different facets of intelligence. So, what does it mean to be human? I think that's a deeply personal thing for each person. When I think human, I think creativity, but that's also relative, because you have a robot that can paint now. Does that mean that robot is creative? Certainly not. But what does it mean to be human? To be able to live, love, appreciate the arts, and I think it's going to be a long time. And also the capacity to care as well, to see other life forms and to be able to uplift them as well. I think it's going to be a long time before we create something completely artificial that can do that by itself. And I see a future where no matter what type of robot, no matter what type of artificial intelligence we create, it will always have the human thread in there, which is why it's really important, like any other piece of technology, that we take deep consideration when we're building these technologies. We don't rush too far into this. We're all just coming out of a pandemic, and we're seeing how things can spiral out of control when left unchecked. So there's no real answer in there. It's more topics that need to be considered when you're discussing these things.
Thanks. I think that's a great answer. We're going to move on to our last question, and then I'm going to ask you all to just have a closing statement for some practical tips. We have a question from Rona Kruger, and what's so inspiring for me is that Rona is in Israel, and she is, you don't have to just be a young teenager learning about robotics. Rona is also still learning, and Rona's asked us, our fears make us very wary of robots that will replace what we do. As we see human-like models, some confidence could develop and remove doubts. What do you think about that, Benj?
I think it's very natural to have those kind of fears, but I think at the core, probably the most useful way to think about robots is to think about them as tools, right? So there's a new set of tools that we're currently building for the toolbox of a human in a workplace. And you should think about, what are these doing for you that can help make your life better? The example I always like to give is somebody who works in HR or human resources probably got into that because they like interacting with people. But the reality is they spend most of their time doing paperwork and mundane systems that they have to file various things. And if you could automate those parts of their job, you could free up the parts of the job that really talk to their passions and what they care about, which is interacting with people. And so if you think about a robot or any kind of automation as a tool in that way, there's infinite potential to make your life better in ways that maybe you don't even realize are problems at the moment.
Thanks so much for that answer. We've run out of time, so I'm just going to ask each of you if you can give us, there's been a lot of questions around what's the latest topics in robotics to research, where can I learn, how do I start? I'm studying machine learning, but I'd like to get into robotics. Peter, let's start with you to just give us some closing remarks on what are practical tips, how do we get into robotics, what's the latest and the greatest?
Yeah, I mean, have a mindset to be adaptable, because that's probably going to be key. I'm not going to tell you to learn to code, because that's also a role that's heavily being automated now. You've seen OpenAI demo their automated Python code from Microsoft Build. And so, nothing is sacred. If you look at things that you can probably take on straight away, if you don't have the hardware capabilities, you can go to Unity. They have some ML agents that you can train. So you can have these virtual robots and see how they interact with the environments there. There's cheaper hardware like the Arduino, the Raspberry Pi 4 that just come out with 64-bit OS and 8 gigs of RAM. So $75 will get you quite a long way. And then if you've got children, or if you're just an adult that loves robots, check out the Spiros that you can program quite easily. And there's also the more expensive ones like the Sony Aibo, or a robotic pet that you can actually experiment with all the sensors, going to the Sony cloud and learning your behaviors and acting cuter as a dog. So check those out.
Thanks so much for that. Silas, over to you. What can we do in Africa? And we look forward to you coming back soon.
Great points by Peter in terms of if you want to get into robotics itself. I'll talk, around the topic of Africa as a continent and our place when it comes to robotics and automation technology itself as well. I mean, first of all, to young people watching this video today, I'm glad that we are, I believe in a global world, but also when you create solutions, they need to be created, around the local context that you're working in. And technology has never been more accessible than it is today. So as you go around looking at the world around you and seeing challenges, think of how, robotics and automation technology can help to solve that. So looking at some of what Peter has said, taking that knowledge, and then that's when it becomes applied. And then, so those are people in the ecosystem. We need that foundation to be able to build a better future. But then also there are the ecosystem enablers as well. Corporate people also in this video call, investors, corporations. It's a responsibility for us all to take care of a continent that we love so much, and that comes by investing in education and also investing in startups as well, so that they can also build and grow. Everybody looks back and talks about the dot-com, boom and the bust, but the invention of computing technology and the internet. Looking back now and where we are today, it's a no-brainer that this has transformed human life so much, and that's the same thing that's going to happen with robotics and artificial intelligence. So any investment that you do into that now is not going to be wasted, and the continent will thank you for it.
Thanks so much. Benj, over to you for a closing statement.
Yeah, I mean, wow. There's so much to say here, but I'll try to keep it short. I think the main thing I always tell my students is work on the coolest thing you can. If you think this is cool, doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can work on it. There's so many resources online at the moment. There's everything like Coursera and Udacity and edX, all these platforms to get online courses. All the research papers that get published get put online as well, so you've got access to them. There's blogs, there's all sorts of content. And even as Peter was saying, there's simulators that you can download, you can use for free to start trying out ideas and so on. And then even kind of out of the virtual world, more and more universities are offering courses in machine learning and AI and robotics. I mean, we have several in our department, such courses, and you can almost structure degrees around this at this point. I think the last point I'd like to add is to be open to collaboration. Working with robots is difficult. These are big, ambitious projects, some of the most exciting projects of our time. And it's very difficult for one person to do by themselves, because there's questions around software, around hardware, around ethics, around interacting with people. And each of those components could need a few people to work on them. And so you really need that to build successful products, whether they're research ideas or products you want to push out into the world. Besides, it always helps to have people to bounce your ideas off and remind yourself that you're not crazy, or you are crazy, but in the right kind of way.
No, thanks so much. I really love that. Be adaptable. Make sure that you learn robotics and don't give up, and just be open to collaboration, because it's such a big field and you need a team to work on these different areas. Up next, we have the Share the Tech Love segment coming up. We'll be giving away some awesome prizes, some robots, and then we have a great performance from the amazing Boskasie, from Jibo and from myself. Thanks so much to our panel. It's really been a pleasure having you here today. Keep doing what you are doing. We appreciate all the work. You're making the world a better place, and I hope you guys all collaborate together, because you will create something special. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Ajit.
This is our way to reward all of you awesome viewers. Each week, all the registered guests will go into a random draw, and tonight we have 2 lucky winners who will be eligible to win a prize. The prizes normally vary from physical to digital products, and tonight we have a really, really cool robot to give away. UB Tech's Jimu Tankpot. This little robot is great for learning the basics in robotics, and we actually use these robots for workshops at our SUSE executive program, where we train executives to be leaders in the future. The next executive program is happening in November the 8th to the 11th. Right, let's draw our winners. Tamsin, can you randomly pick the winners? Well done to Sivi Aguilas and Maliso Mafisa. Congratulations, you have just won yourselves a Jimu robot from UB Tech. Our team will be in contact with you to get your prize. Well done to you guys. Thanks so much. That's all we have for today, folks. I hope you had a really good time and took away some inspiration and insight and some incredible knowledge from our amazing panelists. We can't wait to read about the next South African robotics school. Let's stick together and collaborate so we can get through this and come out ahead. Next week, Thursday, on the 18th of June, we'll be looking at the 3D printing revolution and how it's set to change the way manufacturing, distribution, and supply chains work. We'll have Pablas Holman in the studio, who's one of the first engineers and one of the creators of the MakerBot, as well as some other exciting guests that you'll hear about during the week. Download the Singularity U South Africa app and engage with us and fellow like-minded exponential thinkers. Lastly, make sure to register on our website to stay informed and stand a chance to win in the Share the Tech Love giveaways next week. Remember to like and subscribe on our social media channels as well as our YouTube channel. You hit the subscribe button, and if you want to get notified when we go live, you hit the little bell next to the subscribe button. Each week we end the show with something beautiful. Boskasie is a Cape Town born singer and songwriter who I think is one of the greatest gems to come out of South Africa in recent times. I've been listening to the song the whole weekend. I really hope you enjoy it. She has a unique cross-genre appeal, and if you need to book Boskasie for any online events, please make sure you'll see her handles come up on the screen. We're going to cut over to Boskasie now. It's been a real pleasure hosting you. I'm McMahon. Let's future-proof Africa together. Hope you had a great time. Stay safe and keep smiling. Over to you, Boskasie. Thank you, Jiba.
In the summertime, smoking cigarettes by the beachside, watching the sunset. You are my ocean breeze, like waves on my feet. You make me feel so glad that I took a chance on you. Even after all that you put me through, you're the greatest thing to ever be. In my life forever, you and me. I believe in you. 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 I never felt this love before. You're my blue skies when I see you walking through that door. I feel butterflies when you look into my eyes. You make me feel so glad that I took a chance on you. Even after all that you put me through, you're the greatest thing to ever be. In my life forever, you and me. I believe in you. 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 I believe in you and me, boy. I know we were meant to be, but they say time tells everything. So when the time ends, where will we go? I believe in you. I believe in you. I believe in